Right, great. So I think this is I think this is the third meeting we've had with our new scholars group. So welcome everyone, and well done for being here on time. It's been a hectic virtual day for me today, so I've literally come from one meeting with the civil service, which some of you might have been in, to this one, but we're all here now. So this session, we're really pleased to welcome Ben, who's from UCL, and 3 or 4 ambassadors, did you say? 4, brilliant. So 4 student ambassadors from UCL who are studying, I presume, all undergraduate degrees. Lots of nods, yep. So they're going to share their experience, and I know that you know, students, you've been brilliant at sending me some questions that you'd like to ask the ambassadors, so we will make sure that we ask any of those. But if some of you didn't manage to send those, then obviously put them in the chat. As always, we'd much prefer it if you put your mics on and cameras on and ask, so it makes it for a much more interactive session. But before we start, we've got Nathan here, our assistant principals, who would really like to sort of welcome our new fantastic group of scholars and just say a few words. So I'll just hand over to you, Nathan. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joe. Hopefully you can hear me. Is that okay? Great. First of all, congratulations for being accepted into the Scholars Program despite the significant amount of applications that we received. So it's great that you make to the final stage. And at the same time, we also welcome our colleagues from UCL today. You know, just for everyone's knowledge, I was a student at UCL before, so I did my degree at UCL. And in fact, I was one of the first ambassador at UCL mentoring program back in 2007 or 2006 when it started. And then I did my volunteering at City and Islington Sixth Form College. And I was in my first year at UCL. And now I'm at the Sixth Form College as the head teacher. So it's a very good case study. And, you know, just like for all our Candy students, so you can hopefully use me as part of a role model, but you can see how far you can go in terms of that. So I think once again, you know, congratulations for being accepted into the program. It is not in a way we wanted it to start, because we had a massive planning to do a nice launching event and getting all the food and your parents in January. But unfortunately, due to lockdown, we couldn't do it. But I promise, once we are back to normal, whenever that would be, we will do a massive event and we'll invite our colleagues from UCL and the mentors as well to join us on that. But it would be good, Joe. I thought if we can introduce our colleagues from UCL as well, so we also can find out what subject the students are studying.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. So thank you very much, Nathan. So I'm sure you're going to be seeing Nathan, I'm sure, at the various intervals throughout the time that you're on the Scholars Programme. But so Ben, did you want to say a few words or introduce your ambassadors?
Yes, so thanks very much for having us. So the format of today, I believe, is we're going to just have a sort of a fairly informal Q&A session with our student ambassadors. So yeah, like Joe and Nathan have said, my name's Ben and I work at UCL in our access and widening participation team. And we work with a whole group of current UCL students who are our student ambassadors, and we have 4 of them with us today. So I think the way it's going to work is, well, first of all, I'll get them to introduce themselves. If the ambassadors could turn their cameras on if possible, that would be great as well, so we can see them. I can see Zara and Sinthuja at the moment. And then, yeah, like Joe said earlier on, we've already received quite a few questions from some of you in advance, so we can start answering some of those. But if you have any questions at any point for any of our ambassadors, or for me, or just about UCL or university generally, then feel free to ask them. You can put your hand up. There's the hand raise function, and we can come to you and you can turn your mic on and speak to us if you want. Or if you're more comfortable just typing into the chat, then you can do that at any time as well, and we'll keep an eye on that. So yeah, over to our student ambassadors to introduce themselves. So as I can see you, should we go with Zara first?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Great. So my name's Zara and I'm a final year student here at UCL and I'm studying history.
Great. Sinthuja?
Hi everyone. So I'm Synthesia. I'm in my third year studying medicine. Yeah. So in third year at UCL, your third year is different to medicine. So I'm studying global health this year and not really medicine.
Fantastic, thank you. And also, have we got Sarah on the call?
Yep. Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Hi everyone. Yes, so I'm Sarah. I'm in the same year as Synthesia, so I'm a third year, also studying medicine. And yeah, as you said, we're doing something a bit different this year. So what I'm studying this year outside of medicine is cardiovascular sciences.
Fantastic, thank you. And lastly, Marwan, where are you?
Hi there, my name is Marwan. I'm a third and final year chemistry student.
Brilliant. So, yeah, like I said, feel free to ask questions at any point throughout this. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and for any hands raised as well. But we might as well start with one of the pre-prepared questions. As I think I've said to the ambassadors in advance, it'll be good to hear from several of them to answer the same question, so you can get a few different perspectives, but you might find that they all completely agree, or they might have different perspectives as well. So feel free to more than one of you answer each question if you like. So we'll start off with the first question we got, which was, is going to university worth it if you don't know what you want to do yet? So I assume that person's talking about what career they want to go into. If you don't know what your career is going to be, is it worth going to university? So does anyone have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can start with this one. I'll say yes. I'll say if you speak to most undergraduates, the majority of them don't know what they want to do. And throughout your degree, your mind changes so many times. I remember at the start of my degree, I wanted to do something completely different from what I'm going to go into now. And I'm one of those students that really had no idea what they wanted to do. I knew that I enjoyed chemistry, but I didn't think I wanted to spend my entire life being a researcher in chemistry. And so for me, the advice I'd give really is to try different things. So the perfect job, I'd say, is not going to just fall on your lap. It's really important that if you don't know what to do, to visit different open days, for example, take up any work experience. And from doing that, for example, you can see that, yes, this is for me. Yes, this isn't for me. I'd say a degree really does open up a lot of doors too. The way things work in this country is if you do, for example, a chemistry degree, you're not stuck to chemistry. You can go into so many different jobs. So for example, I'm going into finance, but if I wanted to go into teaching, I could do that. If I wanted to do graduate medicine, for example, I could do that too. And so I'd say, yeah, in terms of opening up doors, a degree definitely does that. But at the same time, if you're someone who knows you want to go into work straight away, or you know studying for 3 or 4 years isn't for you, then maybe it's not the best option. So I'd say to keep options open, yes, it is good. But then again, it's also about the individual.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have anything else to add to that question?
I mean, I guess I would just echo what Marwan said completely. Like when I was choosing what course I wanted to do, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do after university. I just knew that I enjoyed history and that had always been my favorite subject. So I just thought I would do my degree in that. But it does open doors and it has a lot of transferable skills. And after I'm kind of looking to go into something in like civil service possibly. But yeah, I feel like you can get surprised by like what like for jobs, like it doesn't really matter so much what the degree is. Like obviously for some it does, but like I have a friend who and she's like just about to do an internship with in tax consultancy, which is obviously like nothing to do with history. I wouldn't be put off by like having to choose like what you want to do now. Just you can just do a degree in a subject you enjoy and just go from there really.
Great, thank you. I think yeah, lots of really great points made by both Sarah and Marwan there, which I think you both touched on this, that and I think there's the statistic is something like 80% of jobs that ask for a degree, so graduate jobs, it doesn't matter what that degree is, they just want you to have a degree. It doesn't matter what the subject is. So yeah, nearly every job that you will go into after university, you can have studied whatever you like. Anything else on anything like that before we move on to the next question? Okay, and oh yes, Indija, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, if you don't know what you want to study at university, that's not a problem. I would encourage you to go to the open days that universities hold, because they are usually quite interesting. You would find courses that you didn't know existed before. So I know a lot of my friends did that, and that really helped them. So definitely look out for open days. And usually UCL does a lot of, like, this session right now is an extra thing that UCL does. So as a UCL student, I know UCL puts on a lot of these events for students to get an insight. So look out for those online as well. And if you take part in them, then you can see what you find interesting.
Yeah, so you referring to we do a whole range of sort of master classes, taster sessions, summer schools, all those kinds of things. So if you don't know exactly what subject you want to do, those kinds of things are perfect opportunities for you to sort of have a go at studying something at university level, just for a day or a week, see what you think, and then you might realize you love it. You might decide that actually you want to do something completely different, and that's both of those things are absolutely fine. So we're getting lots of questions in the chat, which is great. And one thing which a couple of people have made reference to, and it's one of the questions that we had in advance as well, is what advice would you give to a student to get ready for the study skills they'll need at university? So obviously there's a bit of a step between university level study, between A-level study and university level study. So yeah, would you have any advice for students on how to go about stepping up into that next level of studying?
I can go for this one.
Great, thank you.
I think when it comes to study skills for university level work, it's really about trying out as many techniques as possible and kind of figuring out what works for you, especially at the start. So in terms of like what you did during A levels, definitely see if that works for what you're studying. But if not, try different things out. So it could be things like trying a different form of like note taking, like various note taking systems, or it could be mind maps, or it could be like summarizing. So a lot of degrees you've got to read papers for, like research papers. So trying to summarize research papers into your summaries and put that together for essays. So I think it also depends on if you did science A levels and you're doing a science degree, maybe you don't have to adapt as much. But if you did a different mix of A levels and then you're going into a really kind of different degree, like a humanities essay based one, it does require more experimenting and trying to figure it out. But I think with A levels, you're very used to sitting down, getting the content and learning it and then applying it to your exam or whatever it may be. But university study is a lot more broader, and there's kind of no limit to it. So it's about finding what's relevant and finding what's interesting for you. So there's a lot more reading, I would say, at university, but you kind of figure it out as you go along, and it's all about kind of trying out as much as you can, I'd say.
Great, thank you. Anyone else got anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I'll also say that one of the main differences between, for example, learning at school and learning at university is that stuff at university is a lot more independent. And so in preparation for university, I'd definitely say one of the things to do is research, for example, the modules you'll be doing. And if there's any like recommended reading, that's definitely something you could do to put yourself in a good position before you start your degree. And also for you to sort of practice not being told what to do and taking the initiative to sort of stimulate your own learning. And that's something that was a bit of a shock for me coming into university, is the fact that no one chases you up. If you don't do the work, you don't do the work. If you do the work, it's good. And so I'd say really trying to change your mindset early on to suit sort of the mindset you need for university, which is that you are in charge of your own learning.
Great, thank you. And I think another good question that's come in that follows on from what we've been talking about here is what is the workload like in comparison to A-level? Is there a lot more work at university? Is it easier in terms of workload? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I can offer some insight into this as a history student. For me, I would say my first year, I actually do feel like, I don't know if everyone would agree, but I feel like I did actually do more work kind of in my final year of A levels than I did in my first year of uni, because my first year of uni didn't count. And like, I feel like because you spend so much time like actually at college, for your A levels, and then suddenly you come to university and you've got a lot less contact hours, so you've just got like a lot more time to do things. So it kind of felt more relaxed in that way, as in like just less time pressure. I'd say it's definitely much more intense now, like being in my final year, like having dissertation and stuff. But I don't know, I would say like don't worry too much about the workload, especially in your first year, because it's be quite likely that it won't count. But yeah, I didn't find like a huge difference, like a huge like jump. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Can I just clarify on your use of the phrase "knock"? Your first year doesn't count. That it's quite common in a lot of degree programs and a lot of universities that the way that the marks are weighted is that the work that you do in your first year either only contributes a little bit to your final grade, or in some cases not at all. So it's more foundational work for the work that you do later on. And so any exams you take or any essays you write in your first year might not have much of an impact on your final grade when you graduate a few years later. Any more thoughts on that from maybe any of the other three I know are scientists, and there can be a bit of a gap between scientists and arts and humanities students in terms of workload sometimes.
Actually, I would agree with Zara and say I definitely worked a lot harder during my A levels, especially year 13. So for the medical application, we have to do our entrance exams, and our personal statements are due in October rather than in Jan. So there was a lot of pressure at the end of year 12 and beginning of year 13, which I have still not experienced coming to uni. And that's why I know some of the questions were, how do we prepare for uni? And because our first year didn't count, as already mentioned, it means that you can use first year to experiment with different learning techniques. And if one is not working for you in first term, then you can try something out in second term. So study skills you can develop as you go along, which is what I did. And Sarah is a friend of mine, so I can speak for her as well. We both did the same thing. We learned as we went along the course.
So I'm going to provide a slightly different perspective. My first year did count. It didn't count for a considerable amount. It was 11% of the entire degree. So in comparison to second and third year, it's much less, but it did count. And what I will say is, for my degree program, specifically the first term of first year was kind of used to get everyone up to speed to the same level. And so the first term of first year was really to make mistakes. And so I'd say, don't put too much pressure on yourself to come into your degree and to be perfect. I'd say the reason for first year is to kind of figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. In terms of workload, in terms of my degree, I'd say as you go from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, the workload becomes considerably bigger and the content is considerably harder. But that, I think, is specific to the nature of my degree. As a chemistry degree, kind of makes sense as you go up and further into your educational career, it becomes more complex. So I wouldn't necessarily look at that as a bad thing.
Great, thank you very much. Now, there's another question that's come in, which I think will be particularly helpful to hear from our two medicine students, but the other two might have something to add as well. So someone has asked, if I can't find work experience with my specific subject or subject area I'm interested in, would it be better to do anything available or none at all? And so, yes, different types of subjects might require different levels of work experience or general experience of the subject that you can write about in your personal statement, maybe mention in an interview. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think with medicine, especially this year with the pandemic, finding work experience, if you are thinking of medicine, has been very difficult. But a piece of advice I got when I was in sixth form that I found really helpful was whatever work experience you do, whatever volunteering or whatever experiences you have, you can, if you kind of look at it with a new perspective, you can link it to your degree. For instance, if you do a sport, a team sport, for instance, that shows that you've built up team working skills. And that's so important in a medical environment, right? If you're part of a multidisciplinary team full of different doctors and clinicians. So you can link sports, any kind of general volunteering, even if it's not medical. There are still ways of proving to admissions people that you gained the skills necessary for them. But the whole point of work experience is to show that you've got insight into that career and into that field. So if you can't get work experience that is strictly medical, maybe you could do some more reading on what being a doctor is like. Maybe you can read a book or read some more articles. So the whole point of it really is just to show that you're aware of what you're applying for. If you can't get that exact work experience, just kind of show it in other ways too, I would say.
Great, yeah, thank you. Oh, sorry, Santuja, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, if this is for a medical student or prospective medical student, sorry, there's the GMC document that you can look at for prospective medical students, which outlines what sort of work experience you can talk about in your personal statement. And they very clearly, so sorry, the GMC is a general medical council. So they provide guidelines, and they specifically say you don't need a clinical placement. So, especially in a pandemic, admissions tutors understand that not everyone can get work experience, but also if you are looking for one, Brighton and Sussex Medical School have an online work experience where you can do like this program with them. So maybe you can have a look at that. I know I'm talking about another university, but it's a great opportunity. So you guys
I just put my hand up then because I was just about to mention the Brighton and Sussex work experience. But actually, I think for medicine, there's actually quite a lot out there in terms of virtual work experience. So I mean, the students here, just open the Get Ahead News. There's actually quite a lot of virtual work experience available. There's Observe GP, which is another one. I think Medic Mentor. There's actually quite a lot. Yeah, so I just thought I'd add that, but you beat me to it with the Brighton and Sussex.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there's a huge number of things out there, especially at the moment, that are available online. And I know we mentioned earlier on that UCL offer a whole load of different masterclasses, summer schools and things like that. But as demonstrated, like pretty much every university does something along those lines. In normal times, you guys would be really, really lucky because you live in London, and there are more universities in London concentrated in that one city than anywhere else in the country. But at the moment, you can probably attend most universities' outreach events because they're all happening online. So it's worth looking at whatever is available, provided by lots of different universities. We've had a couple of questions in which I think we can sort of put together. So at what point did you start looking at universities, and what was it about UCL or maybe your other choices that helped you decide where you wanted to go?
So I'll start on that one. For me, it was probably the open day that helped. I mean, I know that's not great right now, but yeah, that probably helped me to decide where I wanted to go. But like looking on the website at like the courses, like for history, UCL was the place that offered like the most flexibility for my course, because like I really didn't want to be stuck doing history modules that I didn't like. Like a lot of unis want you to do like a set number of ancient modules, set number of like medieval. But with UCL, it's like it was completely up to you which modules you choose, which you get to choose, which I liked about it. So yeah, for me, it was probably the course, and also just being in London as a city. Like I'm not from here, I'm from like up in the northeast. So I just really wanted to come to London as well. So that's probably what made me choose UCL.
Great, thanks. Any other thoughts from anyone else about why they chose UCL or wherever else they applied?
Sorry, I guess it was one of the best universities for medicine. So for my course, I knew I wanted to go to UCL. And also, I'm a Londoner. I just wanted to stay close to home, so I chose that. So I think place does matter. London's great, so I don't need to say much more about that. And I didn't know this when I was applying to UCL, but now that I'm here and I'm in my third year, I know that there are so many opportunities in so many different things. So if you want to work, so we're student ambassadors and we get to be involved in these things, but I'm talking about in long-term career and future wise. Even though I'm doing medicine and the typical route would be to become a doctor, actually there are so many different things that we can be involved in, from public health, being with the government, working with the government. A lot of doctors are being involved with the pandemic right now, and even though it's a health issue, it's more to do with public health than your hospital health, if that makes sense, your clinical health. So there's so many things as medical students and as doctors we can be involved in. And because UCL is sort of like a hub where so many researchers are here, so many policymakers are here, you can get so much experience and get involved in these different things. So, you know, just looking back on it, I think this is one of the great places to be rather than sort of anywhere else in the country.
Great, thank you. And also, if you want more details on how to choose which, what subject to study and which university to go to, we've actually, UCL have produced a sort of a 15-minute YouTube video that talks you through all of the different options that you'll have to look at. So I'm just going to post that in the chat now, so with the link. So you won't be able to watch it now because it's 15 minutes long and we're in the middle of a session, but feel free to follow that link or copy it and save it for later, because that's a really, really useful video you might want to watch. Following on, I think, from Sinthuja's answer just there as well, we've had a couple of questions about the way that the world and higher education and careers might change following the current pandemic. So there's one question about are there particular areas of study that will benefit in the future? Will there be, someone's asked, will there be more leniency in jobs with degrees versus apprenticeships, i.e. going to uni versus not going to uni? And I think, I mean, none of us are, you know, able to see the future, so we don't, I wouldn't say we can necessarily predict what's going to happen. However, I feel like in terms of things that we can study that might be relevant to what's currently going on, I have a feeling Sinthuja might have something to say about that, given what she's currently studying. But yeah, any thoughts from anyone about that?
Shall I just start off then, and then someone else?
Why not?
So I am doing global health. I mean, to be honest, I chose global health before I even knew a pandemic was going on. So I applied back in Jan, and
before it was cool.
Sorry.
Before it was cool.
So actually, yeah. So with my course right now, we are looking at, for example, how to make policies that can help people. But it's, you know, surprisingly, we haven't actually focused that much on COVID. We've looked at maternal and child health around the world. We've looked at conflict around the world. So it's actually, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is COVID is a big thing, but that doesn't mean it's going to last forever. So I personally would say, don't think about making university choices just based on the pandemic right now. Honestly, just do what you're really enjoying right now, because like Ben said earlier, it doesn't really matter what course you do, but jobs just prefer you to have a degree, and that's because you learn a lot of skills that are important that you can utilize in different aspects of, you know, whatever job that you're going to go into. So I think the main thing that I would say is whatever degree that you do choose, try to put your 100% effort into it. Don't just do the degree, but be involved in lots of other things. Find people that are specialists in things that you're interested in. I saw a question about data science. That's really huge as well. Even medical students are being taught data science. So as in, a lot of things are going to be important. Just put yourself out there, you know, put all your effort in and do a lot of research and get work experience whilst you're in uni. That's what I would say. Doesn't really answer the question, I'm sorry.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, any more thoughts on predicting the future, anyone, or should we move on? So we've had, there have been just a couple of sort of technical questions about the application process, particularly for UCL. So I'll just rattle through a couple of those because I know I can answer those fairly quickly. So someone's asked about minimum entry requirements for UCL. So UCL do have minimum entry requirements at GCSE and at A-level. At GCSE, there's a sort of a fairly flat standard. I think it's, you need, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's a 6 in English and maths. But beyond that, that is the minimum. and each subject has its own minimum entry requirements for A-level, which we do have quite high entry requirements because we are quite a sort of what's called a high tariff university. However, I've also seen someone ask a question about reduced entry requirements, and that brings me to talk about a scheme that we've got called Access UCL, which is our contextual offers scheme. And lots of universities are doing these now, but basically it's to acknowledge the fact that students from certain backgrounds are statistically less likely to achieve the highest grades, not because they are any less clever or work any less hard, but due to sort of certain areas of disadvantage in their life. You can work just as hard and be just as clever as someone from a more privileged background, and you might get a lower grade. We acknowledge that this happens and we don't think it's fair. So to try and balance that out a little bit, we do have this contextual offers scheme. So it depends on where you live, where you grew up. So that's judged by your postcode and what school you go to. So that will be Candy in this instance. And it will there's an online checker and you can check your eligibility, and if you are eligible for it, then it on average takes 2 grades off our standard entry requirements. So for example, for medicine, our standard entry requirement is an A star and 2 A's. It reduces that by 2 grades to 2 A's and a B, which is a little bit more achievable, especially for such a high subject as medicine, a high tariff subject such as medicine. So yeah, there are those things. Joe, have you got your hand up?
I was just going to say, because I've used that, and lots of our students have applied through the access schemes that you've mentioned. But just a top tip, students, if you go to look at the link where you check whether you're eligible, the postcode for the college is actually the capital city college group postcode. So what I will do is, I can't remember that off the top of my head. I'll put it again. I'll put it in the chat. So if you put in the postcode for City and Islington College, it doesn't come up.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So yeah, so you can just find that by just Googling Access UCL. Again, I'll just put that in the chat so you can find it later. And yeah, if you could share the right thing that needs to be put in there. So okay, those were a few just technical bits about applying to UCL. Someone said, does your dream job have to be inherently linked to your university subjects? And I think we covered that quite well earlier on, in that you can sort of study more or less whatever you like at university, and then you can go into lots of different jobs. If it's a job that requires a certain qualification, then look into that, because like I said, about 80% of jobs doesn't matter what you study, but that there is that 20% that it does matter. If you want to be a doctor, you are going to need to study medicine. So there are a few things like that. So think about what your dream job might be and look into that. Sorry, did someone say something else? No. Part of today was supposed to be focused a little bit more on study skills, and we have had a couple more questions on those. So let's. So someone has asked, what is independent study like at university? So yeah, are you meant to find your own resources based on a topic, or is it more vague? Does anyone want to talk a little bit more in a bit more detail about independent study at university?
Yeah, so for my course, for each module, we'll have like each week will be a new topic, and each week we'll have like some assigned readings that you need to do for the seminars, because those are the type of things that we'll discuss in class. And then there's like secondary readings, which are for maybe if you're doing an essay on that topic that you might want to look at. And then so each week we've got readings for our seminars, and then I have essays as well. So that requires more wider reading that you've got to source yourself through like the library and the library website and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, so for chemistry, we have lectures, and then aside from the lectures, we're given tutorials. And in these tutorials, we're given questions based on the lecture content, which you do beforehand, and then you come to the tutorial and discuss your answers. And the point of those tutorials is to kind of consolidate the content that we went through during lectures. Now, as you go higher up in your degree, you start to realize that the lectures alone aren't necessarily enough for you to completely understand the topic. And so the independent learning here is really crucial, and this is where it really comes in. So at the start of every module, you'll be given, for example, recommended reading or a textbook that explains certain topics very well, or lecturers will give you their office hours, and it's really up to you how much of these resources you use and whether you make the most of them or not. And if you decide not to, again, it's your learning that suffers, and if you do, it's your learning that progresses. And it's really this idea of taking the initiative and taking your own learning into your own hands that in my degree is independent learning.
Great, thank you. So following on from that, I think we've had, like I said, we've had a few questions about sort of study skills and things. So I'm just gonna, we've got 3 quite similar questions that were sent through. So I'm just going to read all 3 out, and then if our ambassadors can sort of talk about whichever aspects they feel most comfortable talking about. So someone asked, how long should an individual study session be? Someone else said, how do you balance revision and making revision resources? And then also, what is your best tip for effective revision? So in terms of independent study and revision, what are your tips? How long should you be doing it for? What kind of things should you be doing in those sessions? Any thoughts from our ambassadors?
So I'll say
I
with
keep
the
unmuting and unmuting myself.
okay.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Synthesia, and then we'll come to Marwan in a sec.
Okay, so I took the typical subjects of science, maths, and chemistry, but I also took a history A level as well because I absolutely loved history. So obviously the way I revised for both of them, both those subjects were quite different. With biology and chemistry, because I knew that's what actually mattered for my entry to medical school, I revised that probably every day. And in terms of your sciences and your maths, it's so important to do past papers because a lot of the questions that do come up in the exam, I wouldn't say the exact same or repeat, but they're quite similar. So, you always have your experiment style questions that come up. You always have your active recall questions, which are like there's 6 markers for biology and chemistry, which you just sort of memorize. If they say like what's homeostasis, it doesn't really change. It's always going to be the same. So those types of questions you want to memorize, you want to know them earlier on. But in terms of your experiment types of questions where they ask, how can the student improve precision, all of that stuff. I'm sorry if I'm boring the humanities students, but if they ask you things like that, then that's going to require a lot more thinking and a lot more practice as well. So really look at your mark scheme. That's what I would say. I used to memorize the mark scheme because that's that's what the examiners are going to use to mark it, right? So that's what I used to do for biology and chemistry. And obviously Zara would be better at saying history stuff, but personally I used to make a lot of essay plans. I didn't like writing essays, so I would just make the plans, sort of what I would say in intro and things like that. But again, that's because history wasn't my main focus. So I should probably just leave that to Zara to talk about.
Marwan, did you have something to say on this as well?
Yeah, I'm basically just going to echo everything that was said. So I did maths, biology, and chemistry. And so with maths, which wasn't mentioned previously, it is really a skill. And it's a skill that you kind of have to develop over time. And the thing is with A-levels, there's quite a methodical way of learning, especially with subjects like maths, where you learn the content and really you just need to practice it as much as possible. And exam papers do tend to repeat themselves. And so if you've practiced and practiced and practiced, when you get into that exam hall, there's not much that they can ask you that you won't know. And another thing that I'll mention with science subjects specifically, especially like biology and chemistry, they have a specification. And what really works for me is going through the specification and ticking off everything so that there's literally nothing they can ask you that you won't know. And so that in combination with the past papers means that you kind of have a foolproof plan, which means that anything they throw at you, you'll know how to deal with. In terms of study skills, I'll say for me, which is something that I still have an issue with now. I have attention span issues, so I can't sit and study for like 45 minutes or an hour. I just get distracted. And so what I found really works for me is to do like intensive study for 15-20 minutes and then take a 10-minute break, and to keep doing that. And I feel like for me that increases my productivity. And so I'd say definitely experiment with what method of studying works for you, because most people can't sit down and just study for 4 hours, and it's not really the most efficient way of doing so too. So yeah.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in from the humanities side as well. So what I did was I would write up all my notes from each topic into a Word document, and then from that Word document I condense things down into like little flashcards, and that's what I use to actually like read over and over and try and remember like the facts that you would need. And then like Synthesia was saying about the essay plans, I would like look at every single essay question that had been asked for however many like years back, and just make like, not like write the essay, but just make little plans of what points I would say, so I knew that I'd be prepared for like all the different types of questions. And yeah, for sources as well, just making sure I'd looked at all the sources that I'd been on in the past, just doing some annotations on them. And yeah, that's how I best revise for my humanities A levels.
Just to add there, I think someone asked a question on how much time you should be spending on making revision sources and actually revising. I think that's such a good question, because there's so much out there right now about active recall, spaced repetition, and how to memorize stuff. And I might apply more for science subjects, but there's just so much out there on there. I think it can get quite confusing. And I think something that gets lost amongst all that is that there's so much value in just reading the content or listening to the lecture. I think sometimes we stress ourselves out. I remember I did this, in that you think that the first time you hear something, you've got to understand it. But that's not normal, and you don't have to understand it the first time you hear it. There's definitely value in just like going over things, or having a listen, watching a few YouTube videos if that helps, and just trying to get a grasp on the concept, and then eventually condensing it down into your own notes, and using the specification to make flashcards, whatever it may be. So I was definitely saying, give yourself some time to make your own notes and just lay it out in a way that works for your brain to be able to absorb that knowledge and then trying to learn it. But obviously, yeah, doing things like flashcards, I would say spend more time there, but initially don't worry about spending too much time making notes and stuff. Like, I think it is a really valuable thing to do when studying.
Great, thank you very much. I think the overwhelming thing that I sort of got from all of that advice is to find the thing that works best for you, and it's not going to be the same for everyone. Unfortunately, I found when I was at university that I could concentrate on reading and studying the best when I was in a cafe, which was a very expensive habit and not even possible at the moment. So that was slightly annoying. One thing, I'll just go back on something I said earlier on. We were talking about the minimum requirements. I overestimated our minimum requirements at GCSE. It is in fact a 5, or equivalent to a C, so not a 6. So you need a 5 in English language and maths for pretty much all of our courses. Some of our courses might ask for things higher than that, but that is the base level. And again, just while I'm on this, there are a couple more questions about sort of the application process, and for UCL particularly. Someone's brought up what is our language requirement. So this used to be quite common amongst universities. It's less so now. We're one of the few places that still do this. But we do ask all of our students to have at least a basic grasp of another language, because we feel it's a valuable thing for students to do. We refer to ourselves as London's global university, and we like our students to have a global outlook and to at least have tackled at least one other language. Usually the way that this works is we ask for, again, a pass, so a 5 in a GCSE modern foreign language. So a lot of you might already have that now. So that is our language requirement. If you don't have that, don't panic, because that is the one requirement we have that if that is the only thing that is sort of wrong with your application, wrong is not the correct word to use there, but if it's the only thing that your application is lacking, that will never be the only reason you don't get a place at UCL. If you have a really strong application in every other way and we want to give you a place, we will still give you a place. But what we might ask you to do is to take a language class as an extra module during your first year. So be prepared. You may be required to do that. So it's a bit more work for you in your first year, but it's not going to stop you getting a place. Also, someone asked about the interview process. So again, most universities for most of their courses don't interview students or don't interview applicants anymore. UCL only interviews for 4 of its courses out of our roughly 400. One of those is medicine. The others are English, art, and architecture. So for most of our courses, we don't interview, and it's all on the application itself. Do either of our medicine students want to say anything briefly about the interview?
Yeah, I think the interview process it's obviously quite kind of stress-inducing, the idea of sitting in front of a group of people and answering questions. But the way UCL does it is that it's a panel interview. So you have a few people, usually admissions tutor, a potential doctor, and one other person there, and they'll ask you questions. But it's really just to find out more about you and why you're interested in medicine. And I think my advice for interviews would be just to show your passion. Like if you've got to that stage, that means they believe that you can be a medical student at UCL. So it's just about showing that in your interview. They'll ask you about your personal statements. Just make sure you are passionate and are actually aware of what you've written in that and can talk about it confidently. And yeah, I think it is mostly a thing to see, does this person really want to do medicine, kind of showing your interest in that, and that you've got a grasp of what the career is. So it's just about practice, really, like talk in front of your mirror, talk to your teddy bear, whatever it may be. Just have a look online at resources. A really good website for prepping for medicine interviews is something called Medic Portal. They've got a whole bank of questions and just loads of good advice on there. So just practice, I'd say.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think again. Sorry.
I'm so
sorry. No, go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly add, just for medicine, it was panel. They were going to change it this year to something called an MMI. If you don't know what that is, that's absolutely fine. You can look it up later. It's just a different form of interview style. I was going to change that to this year, but because of the pandemic, they stuck to the panel style. So when you guys apply, they might change it to an MMI. So just look out for those things, because with an MMI, you can be questioned on some basic maths and data interpretation, so looking at graphs. So right now with the panel interviews, they don't really do that. So just make sure when you're applying what the format is for UCL anyway.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think a really important thing about interviews is that you are always allowed to know what format they'll take. So whether it's a panel, whether it's MMI, or whatever it is, and you can know who is interviewing you as well. You can ask that in advance. They might not tell you straight away, but if you ask them, they will tell you, and that gives you an opportunity to research those people, look up what they've done. If they are academic staff, which usually they are, they will have published academic papers in the past. You could go and read one, and then maybe you could bring something up in the interview that shows that you've done your research into who you're speaking to. So yeah, we've had a couple more things come through. I will say we've got about 10 minutes left, and we're getting towards the end of the questions that have come through. So if you've been sitting on a burning question this whole time, feel free to ask it now, because we do have time for one or two more. But just while you're doing that, so someone has just asked very straightforward one-word question: procrastination? ? So I guess that's, how do you deal with procrastination when you're supposed to be working independently? And also another question that I think links to that quite well is, are there any apps or websites that you recommend using for revision or for study? So do you have any particular apps or websites that you use, and how do you avoid procrastination?
For me, I definitely have to do, as Marlon was saying earlier, work in quite short bursts. So there's this app called Forest that you can just like download on your phone, and it's where like you can like grow a tree, and the tree dies if you go on your phone during that time. So you've got like 25 minutes where you're not allowed to go on your phone, and you only have to study. Otherwise, if you go on your phone, the tree dies, and it's really depressing to see that. So you don't want that to happen. And for like making flashcards, I used to really like Quizlet, which I think is just online, and that's just literally just making virtual flashcards, and they're good because you can just like take those anywhere with you. But yeah, for me, definitely sticking to short bursts, scheduling breaks. I think that worked best for me.
I just wanted to say, for Forest app, it used to be free, but I think it's like £1.99. If you don't want to pay, there's an app called Flora, which does the same thing, but it's just the free version of a different app. I would say Quizlet is great if you want to learn content, but again, just going back to past papers is what's going to get you through A levels, especially if you're doing the sciences and the maths. What I used to do was I used to look at exam questions or past papers and identify questions that used to come up a lot. So, okay, I did A levels a long time ago, so I can't remember the questions now, but let's say homeostasis, always a question on homeostasis. So I would, if the process of homeostasis was like 6 marks, then usually in a mark scheme there's about 8 or 10 marks that you could say. So I would memorize all those 10 marks. So when during the exam, if this question ever comes up, you know, I can use all those 10 to write my 6 mark answer. So use your past papers and the mark scheme to make your exam style notes, if that makes sense. That's what I would suggest doing. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Also, very similar to those apps that you mentioned, I think there's one that I know of called Hold, where instead of growing a tree, you get points, and you can then use those points to redeem against sort of discounts on things. So when you used to be able to go to the cinema, you could get a £5 ticket to any film at View Cinemas if you spend enough time not using your phone on the Hold app. So that's again something that you can do. There are other things other than the non-existent cinemas as well. So as we haven't had any more questions, we've still got about 5 minutes. Can I invite our ambassadors to think about and share, if there was one piece of advice that you haven't shared yet about doing your A-levels or applying to university, that either you were given that advice when you were doing it, or something you wish you had known at the time, something that you have later learned that would have been useful. What would you say? So yeah, does anyone have an answer to that? Sorry, I've just sprung that on you with no warning, so feel free to have a think about it for a second.
I guess I'll quickly go. I would say 2 things. One is the point about procrastination made me think about this. So I think as human beings, we all just some people are amazing at concentrating for like hours and hours. I'm definitely not one of those people. But I would say when you are sitting down to revise, just take away all the distractions. And when you are in lessons, I'm not in school. You guys are in school for pretty much majority of the day. So whilst you're in classes, do try to pay attention for most of it, just so that when you do have to revise a certain lesson, you don't have to spend too much going over the whole lesson again, but you only need to go through some aspects of it that you did stop listening to, or you found really hard. So really try to know what your objectives are for that lesson, and at least for the first 20 minutes pay attention, because that's when your definitions are told by the teachers and things like that. So when you are sitting down to do the work, try to concentrate as much as you can, and then when you take your break, don't think about work at all, and take the break with your full heart. And also just remember your end goal. So personally for me, even though A-levels was really hard, I knew I was applying to medicine and I knew I wanted to be a doctor. So that's what pushed me. So have the end goal in your mind, and hopefully you'll work towards that.
I'll go next. So I'll say this is really a time in all of your lives where you're kind of figuring things out. And so the piece of advice, 2 pieces of advice really that I'd give. The first one being to try everything. See what is out there and see what works for you. And the only way you really do that is by trying. and realizing, yes, this is for me, no, this isn't for me. And the second piece of advice I would give is really not to be too hard on yourselves and don't put too much pressure on yourselves. Yes, it can seem quite overwhelming and you're having to make so many decisions at this point which impact the rest of your life. But as long as you try, as long as you do your best, everything will be okay.
Just to add to that, that concept of kind of trying out everything. We talked obviously a lot about study skills. That's what this session is on. But I know kind of A levels was quite a rough time. You know, there's a lot going on, a lot of big decisions to make. But universities really a time to kind of explore other parts of your life as well, not just your academics. And I think we talked about in our first year, we all had quite a decent amount of free time because the contact hours we had were significantly reduced compared to A levels. So really, like, a piece of advice I got in my first year was if at the end of your degree, the only thing you kind of gained is your degree, something went wrong. Like, university is really like our first steps into adulthood. There's so much for you guys to do, like outside of your academics as well when you join university. So kind of keep that in mind. And it's kind of linked to what Cynthia was saying about keeping your goals in mind. Like, you don't just want to grow as a student, you also want to grow as a person, and hopefully going to university and kind of going through this rough period of A levels will get you there.
Yeah, just to add, I'd say honestly just make the most out of the online resources that are out there. Like, there's so many past papers online, and it's very likely that they are going to ask like similar questions, and just making sure you know the specification really well, making sure that you can be as prepared as possible for the kind of questions that they might ask in exams. And as well, I don't know, I feel like when I was in sixth form, I like put pressure on myself to learn like every single piece of supporting evidence like that I would ever like need to know, but just like keeping it concise, keeping what's on your flashcards, like making sure you know that stuff. Just don't put too much pressure on yourself, because I feel like I definitely did that to know like absolutely everything at sixth form. But yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I've just seen Nathan's put in the chat that from our talk about the apps, there might be the chance that Candy could fund those if you need to pay for them. I'm just going to put Hold, which is the app I mentioned, into the chat just so that you can refer to it. If Zara and Cynthia, I think if you could just type in the name of the apps that you mentioned as well, that would be really great. I think it was you that mentioned them. Also, in terms of funding as well, so we've talked a couple of times about really looking for online, really looking for sort of outreach activities that universities run. So again, the taster days, the master classes, and open days, summer schools, all of these, and it's really worth looking into as many of those as you can. Back when they used to take place in person, universities would often fund people's transport costs to get to those. They might not advertise that, but if you email them, say, I really wanted to come, but it's a £70 train to Manchester or whatever, then often they will pay for that for you if you can't do that yourself. So it's always worth asking. Obviously, at the moment, everything's online, so that's less relevant. But if there's anything to do with university applications, university outreach, apart from the UCAS fee itself, which Candy may pay, I don't know, but universities are generally, they want students and they don't want money to be a barrier for any of those things. So it's always worth, if there's something that you feel that money is a barrier, then get in touch and the university may well be able to fund those things for you. So yeah, Nathan's had to pop off. So yeah, thank you very much to him. But I think, yeah, unless any of our ambassadors have anything else to add, it is now 5 o'clock. So I think that wraps it up quite nicely. So yeah, thank you very much to our 4 ambassadors.
Yeah, thank you everyone. It's really, really useful. Such good top tips, and those apps I've not heard of those. I'm not sure I like the idea of a tree dying, but I can see how it kind of works. Just as a last question, can I just ask our students, a lot of this has been about balancing your studies and obviously study skills, and I think I might have asked this last week, but do you feel you're getting enough work set by your teachers, or do you feel there's too much work, or do you feel that you'd like more work? I think it might seem a daft question, but it'd be interesting to know. So do you feel like you're getting enough directed work set for you, too much work set for you, or just about right? So if you just put your answer in the chat, and then we've got that. Lots of thank yous coming, but not much else. Depends on the subject. Okay. Not enough. Right, gosh, there's a real mix there. That's interesting. So obviously we keep the chats. So it's really interesting to take that back. I'm asking that actually from my son's doing history A-level, and he feels it, not at Candy, he's just not getting enough work, so he's got so much free time. Okay, brilliant. Right, that's really useful to know. Thank you, students. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone at UCL. It was really, really useful. And hopefully we can, we'll see you again a bit later on in the programme. We'll organise perhaps something else, a session a bit later on. But that, yeah, takes us to 5:03. So thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks,
Cheers.
students.
Bye.
Bye.